When watching Final Fantasy VII speedruns, you might notice that we mostly rename the characters to just one letter. Now, real quick, this doesn't apply to Aeris because guard skip actually skips over the cutscene where we rename her, leaving her name field as its starting value in the ROM, which interestingly is Aerith with the TH. Side note, Red 13's name in the ROM is also different from his default name, which is just Red. In the ROM, his name is just Red. And the game actually calls for his name before you name him. And so you can see on this text box here in-game, it calls him just Red before you get to rename him where his default name is Red 13. The point of renaming the characters to single letters is that text boxes take time to type out. And you have to wait for each text box to type out its text before you're able to close it. So shorter character names means it finishes typing faster and you save frames. And it's universally agreed that doing this definitely saves time. Nobody questions whether it actually saves time, right? The common question, though, is exactly how much time does it save? Exactly how much time are we saving by shortening the names? Is it 10 seconds? Is it 30 seconds? Is it a minute? Well, I've got a screenshot from Brutal here back from 2006, estimating that it saves about 72 seconds total, with Cloud being worth about twice as much as any other character. Now, this is based on very sound logic. The idea is that a text box types out 6 characters every frame, except for the first frame where it only types out 5 for some reason. And so, logically, that means that every letter that you take off of a character's name means that for every instance that that character is typed out, you gain about a 1/6 chance for that to save you time, right? And so a character like Kate Sith, where you're able to take off 6 letters, means that you're guaranteed to save 1 frame every time his name is typed, because you've removed 6 characters, and it types out 6 characters per frame, right? Makes total sense. And this is very reasonable. It's a good estimate, right? Very good estimate. And that's really all you need. But I wasn't satisfied with just an estimate. I needed answers. And I also wanted to know, like, the impact of if I accidentally leave an L on Cloud or an A on Barrett, like, exactly how much time does that actually lose you and that kind of thing. So I wrote the script to take in a text file, convert it to a series of text boxes in the form of elements in an array, interpret those text boxes like FF7 would, and report how many frames you are going to spend watching text type. Now, the thing is, writing the script was the easy part, right? Because in order for the script to actually work, we need to feed it this text file. And so actually getting this text file that is a transcript of the, not just the whole game, but specifically just the text boxes that are in a speedrun. We need a text file that is a transcript of the entire game, every single text box that's in the speedrun, no more, no less. That was the real meat of the project. And so I got to work. I opened up the game in Mako Reactor, which is a program for viewing field scripts. I watched through one of my runs, stopping at every single text box, finding the text data from the ROM, copying it, pasting it into a text file. Pause, double Alt-Tab to Mako Reactor, find the text box, highlight the text, copy it, double Alt-Tab to Notepad, paste, double Enter, double Alt-Tab back to the video, play, and repeat. And repeat, and repeat. But the numbers are in. And here are my results. All right. So here, if we run the script and we just leave all of the names default, with Aeris being with the TH because we are considering guard skip here, I have it set to just automatically default them if I don't put in a name. We get, first of all, 4,651 is the total number of text boxes in the entire run. This is the way that I ran it. So maybe this will vary just a tiny bit between runners depending on what items they pick up or that kind of thing. But then a lot of those text boxes don't matter, as in they don't matter for this data. Because, for example, if a text box is a character whose name is not variable, right? Like, let's say Rufus says something. That text box is always the same exact length. because there are no character names within it, assuming Rufus doesn't say somebody's name, right? So when we consider just the text boxes that have variable length, like they have a character's name in them, there are 2,468 text boxes that have character names in them. Then, of those text boxes, we are spending 18,169 frames watching text type. And so I've actually got another script here that I made for something else at one point. This is actually just to time how long runs are, but we can also use it to say at 30 FPS, this many frames is 10 minutes, 5 seconds, 633 milliseconds. So that's the amount of time that we are just waiting on text boxes to type out before we can confirm them away. So if we run the script again, and we name Cloud one letter, and Barrett one letter, and Tifa one letter, Eris is going to have to stay her name, because again, we can't name her. And then everybody else gets named one letter. Yuffie and Vincent actually don't matter, because in an any % no slots run, we don't grab either of them, but they're in here anyway. Then, here it is. This is the big moment. We are reduced now to 16,431. And so how many frames is that? Let's do the math. So 18169 minus 16,431. So we save, by naming all the characters one letter, we save 1,738 frames. And so once again, to put that into this other script, 1,738 at 30 frames per second. That is a total of 57 seconds, 933 milliseconds. That is all just under a minute. So basically a minute, but more like 55 seconds. Now, this doesn't account for the time that it takes to rename a character, but that's pretty quick. As long as you get pretty fast at it, it's just a matter of holding X and then timing your start button. And it's pretty quick to rename the characters. Now, where does all that time save come from? Well, I went through and I grabbed a whole bunch of extra data here. So, first of all, I generally like to keep Kate as just CA. Like I leave the A on his name so I can, I don't know, just so it's differentiatable from Cloud. And then if you were to leave the I on Sid for the same reason, that would lose you just over 2 seconds only. So it's only a 2-second difference if you leave these names like this in order to be able to differentiate their name still. And so now I've got it broken down by character, and let's check out all that information here. So Cloud to C alone is responsible for 22 seconds. That's almost half of the time save total is just Cloud alone, which makes a lot of sense because, you know, Cloud is the main character. If you were to accidentally leave the L on Cloud, that loses 5 seconds, almost 6 seconds. That basically basically 6 seconds lost just from leaving that single letter on, which is pretty interesting. Barrett is responsible for about 11.5 seconds of the amount, and if you were to leave the A on Barrett's name by accident, that loses about 2 seconds. Tifa is responsible for 10 seconds, almost 11 seconds, and leaving the I on Tifa's name loses 4 seconds, which is really surprising. But the thing is, you know, part of this project has been, the interesting part of this project is that going through and actually reading every text box. The thing is, I've been speedrunning this game for like 2.5 years, and so it's been a long time since I've actually read this game's text boxes, you know? And first of all, it gave me a real appreciation for the game's writing and story that I've kind of not really paid much attention to for a while, so that was fun. But also, paying this much attention to it, I really noticed just how much Tifa is in this game's text boxes, to where on Barrett, if you reduce Barrett's name to B, you're taking 5 characters off, which means almost every time that his name shows up, you save a frame. With Tifa, you're only taking off 3 characters, which means only half the time that her name shows up do you save a frame, about, as an estimate, right? And they save about the same, like that saves about the same amount of time, right? About 2/3 a second difference. But then, yeah, if you leave the I on Tifa's name, that's 4 seconds more. Now, is 4 seconds that big of a deal? Not really, but it definitely takes less than 4 seconds to, delete that I off of her name, right? It's just a surprising amount. I'm not acting like 4 seconds is the end of the world. I'm just saying it's an interestingly high amount of time for a single character, for a character that's not Cloud also. But anyway, now we get to some smaller ones. Renaming Red 13 to R, total opposite of Tifa. You can take 7 characters off of Red's name, which means that every time his name shows up, you're guaranteed to save a frame, and sometimes you'll save 2 frames. That still only saves barely 4 seconds. And then, accidentally leaving the E on his name gives you a half a second, loses you a half of a second. But yeah, that's not very much at all. Now, it is worth considering that we do skip Cosmo Canyon, and so, Cosmo Canyon is where a good amount of Red's dialogue is, within the caves, meeting or finding Seto and all that. So that's part of the reason for that. Kate Sith, again, huge amount of letters to take off of his name. You're guaranteed a frame every time. And Kate Sith, actually, again, going through the game, all the game's text boxes, Kate Sith has a surprisingly large amount of dialogue. However, still not nearly as much as like Cloud and Tifa. And so we're still looking at only about 7 seconds saved from Kate Sith. But still, 7 seconds is very respectable. And now we get to Sid. Sid, a character whose name is very short anyway, it only saves 2.5 seconds to take both characters off of Sid. And it only and leaving the Ion loses you about 1 second. So yeah, his it looks like about 1.25 seconds, just about, is each character that you save from Sid. And so in my runs, until now, I've always assumed that this was going to be the case, and so I just never even bothered renaming Sid at all. And I'm probably going to keep doing that. Because, yeah, Sid does not matter. And so those are the numbers broken down. Now, these numbers are off by like a couple frames probably, because if you consider like a text box that has both Cloud's name and Tifa's name in it, well, these numbers were taken by only renaming one character, right? And so if you rename both characters, that might save like 1 extra frame in 2 circumstances or something like that, right? So these might be off by 30 milliseconds or something like that, right? The other thing that might throw these numbers off just a tad, I know my whole point here is that I went for perfection, but it can't be perfect. The reason it can't be perfect is because there are some text boxes that don't actually wait, that you're not actually waiting for the cutscene to advance, right? Like sometimes there's a text. Most of the time, a text box comes up, and when you close that text box, that's when the cutscene continues. But there are some cutscenes where there's some other like animation or something that also needs to finish, and so whether the text box took 20 frames or 21 or 22 frames to type out doesn't matter, because you're waiting for an animation anyway. And the amount of time that it would take to reliably research that is too much, right? And so we can assume that those kinds of text boxes aren't super frequent, right? Most of them aren't like that. But let's just say I'd be willing to say that this number might be off by like 2 seconds, considering those text boxes, right? That would just be my guess. Now, the thing about back to this forum post is that remember that back in 2006, Calm Skip wasn't a thing, Cosmo Canyon Skip wasn't a thing, Guard Skip wasn't a thing, right? And so these numbers are based on a run that has more text boxes than what we have now. And so with that considered, Brutal's estimation is remarkably on the dot here, right? Where it's just 2 seconds off for Cloud. And again, that probably means that his is just actually correct because of more text boxes, right? Barrett looks about exactly right. Tifa looks about exactly right. Red looks about exactly right. So it's kind of funny to see this, that you know, putting in all the work to get the real true answer to all of this. Oh, and look at this actually. So Sid is not really affected by hardly anything because you get him after Cosmo Canyon skip and Calm skip and Guard skip. So he wasn't affected by the major skips, except for Raid on Midgar skip, which has very little dialogue in general. And he's just on the dot with his estimations from back then. So it's kind of funny that I did all this work in order to basically come up with exactly the answer that Brutal very, very on the dot estimated almost 20 years ago. Oh no, this was almost 20 years ago. But yeah, hey, now we got the answers. So Brutal, if you're watching this 20 years later, you were right, buddy. You were right. All right, and that about does it for what I wanted to say. We did it. We have like basically almost exactly the correct answer now on how much time does it take, or how much time does it save to rename characters. It saves about 57 seconds minus the amount of time that it takes to rename them. And now you might be wondering, like, is turbo a factor here? No. Because all we're talking about is the amount of time that it takes for the text box to type. And whether or not you're using turbo, that it takes the same amount of time for a text box to type out, right? So this has nothing to do with turbo, nothing to do with mash speed. This is specifically, very specifically, scientifically, just how many frames are you waiting before the game will accept your input. So that's that. There's your answer. If you've ever wondered how much time do we actually save by shortening the characters' names to one letter, it's about 57 seconds. It's about 58 seconds minus the amount of time it takes to actually do the renaming, which I would say it probably takes like a second and a half to rename every character put together, right? So that's that.